Story 1. The Vanishing Hotel Room. It was supposed to be nothing more than a quick stop on a long road trip. A young couple, exhausted after hours of driving through the endless flatlands of the Midwest, decided to pull into a small town just before nightfall. The streets were quiet, with just a handful of shops and a gas station still open. But nestled at the end of the main road stood a charming little hotel. Its sign flickered weakly in the evening light, but the warm glow coming from the lobby windows felt inviting, safe, even. Inside, the place had a rustic, old-fashioned charm. Wooden floors creaked under their shoes. Chandeliers cast a golden light across the check-in desk, and the faint sound of a piano drifted in from somewhere deeper in the building. The staff greeted them kindly, gave them an old brass key, and pointed them toward their room on the second floor. On the way up, they passed other guests in the hall, families with children, a man carrying luggage, even a couple laughing quietly to themselves. It felt lived in, normal. Their room was cozy, with patterned wallpaper, a neatly made bed, heavy curtains, and a view of the quiet town below. They unpacked a little, freshened up, and later had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a hearty meal served by a friendly waitress. Nothing about the night felt unusual. If anything, it was comforting. The next morning, everything changed. They went down for breakfast, enjoyed their coffee and eggs, and then returned upstairs. But when they opened the door to their room, they froze. The room wasn't theirs anymore. The bed was gone. The dresser, the curtains, the paintings on the walls, everything had vanished. The space was completely empty, just 4 cracked walls and a floor covered in dust, as if no one had stepped inside for years. At first, they thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe they had gone to the wrong room, but no, the room number matched their key. They checked again and again, but there was no denying it. Their belongings, their suitcases, everything they had left behind, gone. Panicked, they rushed downstairs to the front desk, but the lobby, too, had changed. The lights were off. The polished wood that had looked so warm the night before was now dull and splintered. The front desk was empty, no staff in sight. Cobwebs hung in the corners. The piano in the distance was silent. It was as though the hotel had aged decades overnight. Desperate for answers, they ran back outside into the daylight and found a local shopkeeper. When they explained what had happened, the man gave them a strange look. "That hotel?" he asked, pointing down the street. "It's been closed for years. 10, maybe more. Nobody's stayed there since the fire." The couple tried to insist, explaining the staff, the guests, the dinner, their room, but the locals shook their heads. To them, the hotel had been nothing but an abandoned building for over a decade. The strangest part, the couple never recovered their belongings. Their clothes, their luggage, even their car keys, all had vanished with that room. To this day, they can't explain what happened. For one night, it was as though they had stepped into a version of reality that no longer existed, a glimpse into the past that shouldn't have been possible. And when morning came, that world simply disappeared. Story 2. The Copy of Himself. It was an ordinary morning. A man decided to stop by his usual coffee shop on the way to work. The kind of place where the baristas know your order and the regulars all blend into the background. He pushed open the door, the smell of roasted beans and warm pastries wrapping around him like a blanket. Nothing seemed unusual. But then, He froze. In the far corner of the cafe, by the window, sat a man sipping coffee, quietly reading a newspaper. At first glance, nothing was strange. But the longer he stared, the harder his heart began to pound. The man sitting there looked exactly like him. Not just similar, identical. Same clothes, same hairstyle, same slight slump in the shoulders. And then he noticed something impossible. The small scar above the right eyebrow. A scar he had gotten as a teenager after falling off his bike. It was something so specific, so personal, that nobody else could possibly have it in the exact same place. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe his mind was exaggerating the resemblance. But when the man at the table lowered the newspaper and looked up, their eyes locked. And in that instant, he knew he was staring at himself. The double didn't look shocked or confused or even curious. He simply gazed back with calm, steady eyes, as if this moment had been expected. Then, without a word, he folded the newspaper neatly, stood up, and walked toward the door. As the doppelganger passed, their shoulders brushed. He felt the weight, the presence, the warmth of another living person. This wasn't an illusion. This wasn't a reflection. This was real. He glanced around at the other people in the cafe. Baristas making drinks, customers scrolling through their phones, but nobody else seemed to notice. No one gave the slightest reaction, as if a perfect copy of him hadn't just walked right past. The door closed with a soft chime, and the man was gone. He stood there in stunned silence, gripping his coffee cup with shaking hands, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. Who was that? Another version of him? A glitch in reality? Or something far more sinister? To this day, he swears it wasn't a dream, wasn't a coincidence, wasn't a lookalike. He insists he saw another version of himself, down to the smallest scar only he should have. And what unsettles him most isn't the encounter itself, but the way his double looked at him. Calm, knowing, almost as if he were the copy, and not the other way around. Story 3. The looping phone call. It was a normal evening on campus. A college student was sitting in his dorm room, finishing up an assignment, when his phone suddenly buzzed. He glanced down at the screen. "Mom," he answered, and her familiar voice came through the speaker. "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" she asked. Her tone was casual, warm, just like always. He smiled. "Yeah, Mom. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. They said goodbye, and he set the phone back on the desk. Nothing unusual. But before he could return to his work, the phone buzzed again. Same caller ID. His mom. He answered, a little surprised. "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" He froze. The question was identical, not just in words, but in tone. It was like hearing the same recording played again. He brushed it off, thinking maybe she hadn't heard his answer the first time. "Yeah, Mom, I told you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. They hung up. This time, he stared at the phone a little longer, waiting. And sure enough, it buzzed again. The screen lit up. His mom's name. His chest tightened. He picked up slowly. "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" Same words. Same voice. Same intonation, down to the smallest detail. This time, a chill crept up his spine. He didn't know what to say. His answer came out shaky. "Yes, Mom, I'll be there." The line went dead. For several minutes, he just sat there, phone in hand, his pulse pounding. His mind raced for an explanation. A prank? A glitch in the phone? But why would his mom say the exact same thing 3 times, like a loop caught in some broken recording? Later that evening, when he finally arrived home, he confronted her. "Why did you call me 3 times asking the same question?" She looked at him, puzzled. "What are you talking about? I called you once." "Just once," he insisted, describing each call in detail. The repetition, the timing, the way her words were exactly the same. She shook her head, swore she hadn't touched the phone again after the first call. To this day, he can't explain it. Did his phone glitch? Was it some strange technical error? Or was it something far more unsettling, like reality itself stuttering, repeating a single moment in time, as if he'd caught a glimpse of the Matrix breaking down? Story 4. The Time Slip Car. It was just past midnight when a man found himself driving alone on an empty country road. The world around him was silent, the kind of silence that makes you notice every little sound. The hum of the engine, the crunch of tires on gravel at the edges, the faint static of the radio that barely picked up a signal. The road stretched endlessly ahead, lit only by the steady glow of his headlights. Then, without warning, the world shifted. The smooth asphalt beneath his tires gave way to a loud, jarring clatter. He glanced down in confusion and realized he was no longer driving on pavement at all, but on uneven cobblestones, the kind you'd expect to find in an old European village, not a rural highway in the middle of nowhere. His first thought was that he had taken a wrong turn. But when he looked around, his breath caught in his throat. The tall, modern streetlights that had lined the road were gone. In their place was only darkness, broken occasionally by the soft flicker of lanterns hanging from wooden posts. The fields on either side looked different too. No fences, no power lines, just open land stretching into the night. And then he saw them. Up ahead, in the dim glow of his headlights, a horse-drawn carriage rattled along the cobblestones. The horse's hooves echoed in the night, and the carriage looked like something pulled straight out of the 1800s, wooden wheels, lanterns swaying, a man in old-fashioned clothes holding the reins. Behind it, another carriage appeared, moving slowly, its passengers dressed in clothes no modern person would wear. The man's chest tightened. His mind raced. Was this some kind of reenactment? A movie set. But there had been no signs, no people, no explanation. Just empty farmland for miles. He slowed down, afraid to pass the carriages, afraid of something he couldn't quite name. For several minutes, he drove carefully behind them, his headlights cutting through a world that didn't belong to his time. His GPS, which had been tracking his route, suddenly glitched, blank screen, no signal, as though it too had been pulled out of its element. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. The cobblestones smoothed into asphalt again. The lanterns were gone, replaced once more by bright electric streetlights. The fields looked modern again, with fences and signs and the faint outline of power lines. When he looked back, the carriages had vanished. His GPS blinked back to life, showing him on the same straight road he'd been driving on all along. No detours, no alternative routes, as if nothing had happened. But he knew what he saw: the sound of the hooves, the flickering of the lanterns, the uneasy feeling in his gut, It was all too real. To this day, he wonders if, for a few minutes, he slipped through a crack in time. Maybe not just a glitch in the matrix, but a glimpse into the past, a road not meant for him but for those who had ridden it centuries before. And what still chills him is this thought: if time can pull you backward without warning, what's stopping it from pulling you forward? Story 5. The Stranger Who Knew Too Much. It was a late evening at the train station, the kind of night when the world feels half asleep. A woman sat quietly on a bench, headphones in her ears, waiting for the last train home. The platform was dimly lit, nearly empty, with only a handful of tired commuters scattered across the seats. The low hum of the tracks and the occasional flicker of a fluorescent light were the only reminders of life around her. That's when he appeared. An older man, neatly dressed in a worn-out coat, walked up and sat down beside her. At first, she barely noticed. People often came and went on the platform. He gave a polite smile and started small talk. The weather, the delays, the usual chatter strangers share when waiting for a train. His voice was calm, almost soothing. But then, his words changed. "You're from Greenfield, aren't you?" he said casually. She blinked, pulling out one headphone. "I'm sorry. Greenfield," he repeated. "That little house on Oak Street. Blue shutters, right?" Her stomach dropped. That was the town she had grown up in, a detail she hadn't mentioned to anyone around her. She laughed nervously. "That's random. How do you know that?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he kept going. "You had a dog. A golden retriever. What was his name again?" "Oh yes, Max. You cried for days when he passed away." Her blood ran cold. She hadn't thought about Max in years. Now fully alert, she turned to face him. "Who are you? How do you know this?" The man only smiled, as if her reaction amused him. Then he leaned closer and, in a low voice, whispered something that made her skin crawl. "You shouldn't fight with your sister so much. She's still upset about last week." Her heart raced. The argument with her sister had been private. No one else had been there. There was no way, no possible way, this man could know. She stood up abruptly, backing away. "Tell me who you are," she demanded, her voice trembling. But the stranger simply rose to his feet, adjusting his coat as though nothing unusual had happened. He gave her one last look and said calmly, almost knowingly, "We've done this before." And then he walked away, disappearing into the shadows at the far end of the platform. When she finally gathered the courage to glance around for help, she realized something strange. The other commuters on the platform hadn't reacted at all. They sat motionless, staring at their phones or gazing at the tracks, as if they hadn't seen the man, as if he'd never been there. When the train arrived, she boarded in a daze. To this day, she can't explain who he was, how he knew those intimate details, or what he meant by his final words. But she swears one thing: his tone carried certainty. And it left her with a haunting thought. What if this life isn't the first time she's lived it? Story 6. The Disappearing Cashier. It was a quiet evening when a man pulled into a small grocery store on the edge of town. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of aisles, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, and the faint hum of the refrigerators lining the back wall. He grabbed a few snacks, chips, a soda, some candy, and headed toward the checkout counter. At the register, A young woman greeted him. She looked like any normal cashier, dark hair tied back, a name tag pinned neatly to her shirt, a polite smile as she scanned each item. They exchanged the usual small talk, the kind you barely notice in the moment. She handed him his bag, gave him his change, and wished him a good night. Everything about it felt ordinary, almost comforting. But just as he stepped outside, he realized he had forgotten one thing. Annoyed, he turned right back around and pushed open the door again. That's when he froze. The counter where the young woman had stood only seconds ago was completely empty. No cashier. No bagging station. Nothing. The register was dark, as if it hadn't been used in years. Confused, he looked around. Maybe she had stepped away for a moment, but there was no sign of her anywhere in the store. Instead, another employee stocking shelves walked by. The man asked casually, "Hey, where did the cashier go?" The worker gave him a puzzled look. "Cashier? We don't have anyone at the registers tonight. It's all self-checkout. Has been for months." The man frowned, gripping the bag of groceries in his hand. "No, that's not right. I just checked out. A young woman rang me up, dark hair, name tag, right there at the counter." The worker shook his head firmly. "Sir, I think you're mistaken. Nobody's been stationed there since we switched everything over." The man's heart started to race. He looked down at the bag in his hand. His items were there, neatly packed. The receipt was crumpled in his pocket. The change clinked in his hand, physical proof that the transaction had happened. And yet, according to the store, it never could have. When he insisted again, the worker gave him a strange, uneasy glance and walked away, clearly unwilling to discuss it further. The man was left standing in the fluorescent-lit silence of the store, gripping groceries that, apparently, no one had sold him. To this day, he can't explain what happened. Who was the woman behind the counter? Was she a ghost, a hallucination, or something stranger, a glitch in reality itself? And the part that still haunts him most, her voice, so warm and casual, as she handed him the bag and said, "Have a good night." Story 7. The car that vanished. It was just past midnight when a group of friends piled into a car after a long night out. The roads were nearly empty, the kind of silence where even the hum of tires against the asphalt felt unnaturally loud. The four of them joked and laughed at first, their voices filling the darkness. But soon the mood shifted when one of them glanced into the rearview mirror. Guys," the driver said, tightening his grip on the wheel. "There's a car behind us." Sure enough, two headlights glowed steadily in the distance, following closely. At first, no one thought much of it, just another late-night traveler on the same lonely road. But as the miles passed, the car stayed there. Not gaining, not falling back. Just there. "Maybe they're lost," someone suggested. "Or maybe they're tailing us," another friend muttered nervously. The tension grew. The driver tried slowing down. The car slowed down too. He sped up. The headlights adjusted, staying fixed in the mirror like a predator stalking prey. Finally, on an empty stretch of road with nothing but fields on either side, something strange happened. The lights swerved sharply to the left, as if the car had taken an exit, but there was no exit. No driveway, no dirt road, no space for a vehicle to turn. The headlights flickered once against the darkness, and then were gone. The driver slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt, throwing everyone forward. Heart racing, he turned around in his seat. The road stretched behind them in both directions, perfectly empty. No taillights, no headlights, no sound of an engine fading away. Nothing but silence. "Where the hell did it go?" one of the friends whispered. They all got out of the car, their shoes crunching against the gravel shoulder as they scanned the horizon. The night air was heavy, unnervingly still. There were no turnoffs, no ditches, no trees or structures where a car could have hidden. The road was as flat and bare as it had been for miles. And yet, every single one of them swore they had seen it. The headlights. The way it had matched their speed. The sudden swerve. For years afterward, whenever they reunited, the conversation would inevitably drift back to that night. And no matter how much time had passed, every one of them remembered it the same way. A car that followed them for miles, only to vanish without a trace on a road where disappearance was impossible. Some say it was just a trick of the eyes, or a car shutting off its lights. But the friends know what they saw. And sometimes, late at night, the driver still checks his rearview mirror, half expecting to see those same two headlights glowing steadily behind him. Story 8. The Misplaced Childhood Memory. Memories from childhood often blur with time. Faces become vague, details slip away. But for one woman, there was a memory she could never forget. She remembered as clearly as yesterday, playing at a neighbor's house when she was very young. The details were etched into her mind. The wallpaper in the living room, a faded floral print with tiny roses, the faint smell of cinnamon that always seemed to linger in the kitchen, the creaky wooden stairs leading up to the second floor. And then there was the little girl, about her age, with dark braids and a laugh that echoed through the halls. They would spend hours together, playing with dolls on the carpet, hiding in closets during games of tag, whispering secrets only children could think mattered. The house had always felt like a second home to her, a place of comfort and warmth. Years later, as an adult, she found herself reminiscing with her mother. Smiling, she said, "Do you remember when I used to play over at the neighbor's house? The one with the rose wallpaper? And the little girl with the braids?" Her mother frowned. "What house?" "The one just down the street," she insisted. "I used to go there all the time. You'd walk me over and pick me up. I can still picture the kitchen. Smelled like cinnamon." The little girl's name was Emily, I think. Her mother's expression turned serious. "Honey, there wasn't a little girl there. The family that lived in that house moved away before you were born. After they left, the place was empty for years. Abandoned." She laughed uneasily, thinking her mother was teasing, but her mother didn't laugh back. She explained that the house had been boarded up since before her birth. Dusty windows, peeling paint, no sign of life inside. No neighbors to play with. No little girl named Emily. But the memories were too vivid to dismiss. The wallpaper, the smell, the sound of that little girl's laughter. They weren't dreams or faint imaginings. They were clear, consistent, as real as any other memory from her childhood. Years later, curiosity got the better of her. She walked past the house again, now crumbling and overgrown. The windows were still broken, the walls decayed. It had clearly been abandoned for decades. Yet, standing there on the sidewalk, she could almost hear the echo of children's laughter spilling from inside. To this day, she can't explain it. Did she somehow remember a life she never lived? Slip into someone else's past? Or was it a glitch in reality, giving her memories of a world that shouldn't exist? And the strangest part, sometimes late at night, when she closes her eyes, she still dreams of that house. She still dreams of Emily. Story 9. The wrong train stop. It had been a long day at work, and all the commuter wanted was to get home, eat dinner, and collapse into bed. He boarded his usual evening train, headphones in, half dozing as the city rolled by outside the window. The ride was routine, almost mechanical. He had done it hundreds of times before. When the train finally slowed at his stop, he stepped off without a second thought. At first, everything seemed normal. The station looked the same. The signs pointed in the same direction, and the familiar street stretched out ahead. But as he walked further, a strange sense of unease crept in. The streets didn't feel right. The first shop he passed, a corner convenience store, had a different name. The neon sign, which had always flickered, now glowed perfectly. A cafe that should have been there was replaced by a hardware store he had never seen before. People passed by, but he didn't recognize any of them. Not the faces, not the fashion. Even their accents, when they spoke to one another, sounded slightly off. He tried brushing it off as fatigue. Maybe he had gotten off at the wrong station. But when he checked the sign again, it clearly showed his stop, the exact one he had used for years. That's when he pulled out his phone to get his bearings. No service. The signal bar was empty, as if the network didn't exist here. His stomach tightened. He began walking toward his apartment, hoping familiarity would return. But the more he walked, the more wrong it became. Streets branched off in unfamiliar directions. Buildings were taller or shorter than they should have been, and even the street lamps looked different, older, with a dull orange glow instead of the bright white he was used to. He walked in circles, panic rising with every block. "This isn't my city," he whispered under his breath. After what felt like an hour of wandering, he gave up and hurried back to the station, his footsteps echoing against the unfamiliar pavement. The platform was nearly empty, but he boarded the very next train, his hands trembling as he gripped the pole. When the train arrived at his stop again, he hesitated before stepping off. But this time, relief washed over him instantly. Everything was back. The flickering neon sign, the cafe on the corner, the streets he knew by heart. Even his phone buzzed to life, filling with notifications. He never told anyone about that night. How could he explain it? He had gotten off at the same stop twice, but only once had it been the city he knew. To this day, he wonders what would have happened if he had kept walking. If he had ignored the unease and gone deeper into that strange version of his city. Was it a glimpse of a parallel world? A glitch in the system? Or a reality he was never meant to see? Story 10. The message from nowhere. It was just past midnight when a teenager sat hunched over his desk, drowning in textbooks and notes. The house was quiet. His parents asleep, the world outside still. The only sound was the scratch of his pen and the occasional rustle of pages as he tried to force himself through another chapter. Then, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, expecting a friend, maybe a late-night meme or a message about homework. But it wasn't a number he recognized. No name. Just a random string of digits. Curious, he opened the message. It was short. Just 3 words. "Don't go outside." He frowned. For a moment, he thought it was a prank. Some random spam or a joke from a friend using a different number. Still, something about it made his stomach twist. The phrasing was strange, not funny, not casual. It felt like a warning. He typed back, "Who is this?" But before hitting send, he hesitated. Instead, he set the phone down and shook his head. "Weird," he muttered, brushing it off. A few minutes later, just as he started to lose himself in his notes again, the night was ripped apart by the sound of screeching tires. He shot up, heart pounding. Then, crash. The deafening impact echoed through the street outside his window. He rushed over and pulled the curtain back. 2 cars had collided directly in front of his house. Metal twisted and glass shattered across the pavement. Smoke hissed from one of the engines. The street, so empty moments before, was now chaos. He stumbled back from the window, his eyes darting to the phone on his desk. The message, "Don't go outside." His pulse thundered in his ears. Hands shaking, he quickly typed a reply. "How did you know?" But the message wouldn't send. Instead, an error popped up. "Number not in service." He tried again, then scrolled back through his messages. The text was still there, but the number had vanished, as though it had never existed. The next day, desperate for answers, he contacted his phone company. After some digging, they told him the same thing. There was no record of any text message sent to his phone at that time. According to their logs, it hadn't happened. But he knew what he saw. He could still feel the weight of that moment, the buzz of the phone, the warning in the dark, and then the crash. To this day, he doesn't know who sent the message. A guardian angel, a glitch in the system, or something else entirely, something watching him from the shadows of reality. And the most unsettling thought, if that message hadn't come through, he might have been outside at that very moment.